Hey everybody, it's Anna Keck, and we're here for this week's episode of Ask the Doctor with Dr. Jeremy Thornton. Today we're going to be discussing heart health, and he will be sharing all of his wealth of information. What I love the most about him is he makes it very user-friendly. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. I've never studied any of that. I've just been very aware of what goes on in the world of supplementation. But he breaks it down to where anybody can understand this. It kind of reminds me of Ask the Doctor for Dummies. You know, remember those yellow books that we got for everything? He just breaks it down to where we can all understand it. So tonight, that's what he's going to do. He's going to share with us all about heart health. So with nothing else, take it away, Dr. Jeremy, and please teach us.
Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for hopping on tonight and spending a little time with us. And I hope that one of my goals tonight is to, one, bring you value and information that maybe you've never heard before, or a deeper understanding on something that could affect your health or impact the health of somebody you love. So I was curious just if anybody currently on here has any type of heart issues or anything related to heart disease or cardiovascular disease. Or maybe you're on here because of somebody that you love is dealing with something like that. Would love to know in the chat just kind of what people are experiencing or what loved ones are experiencing, and I can kind of see what most of you are interested in. And I always put a disclaimer at the beginning, or I try to, that I'm not giving specific medical advice for you. As I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor, right? And so I don't want to say that anything we talk about tonight, directing you to change your lifestyle or your medications or anything that you haven't talked over with your personal physician. And so I always like to cover that and write some tachycardia in there. And I do have a lot of experience with that, Janine. We're not going to talk a lot about arrhythmias tonight, but more of the larger picture of cardiovascular disease, congestive heart disease. Sorry you lost your mom, Susie. To that, number one killer in Americans is heart disease. Doug, you had 2 heart attacks, is that right, buddy?
I did. One in January and then another one in July of 2021. So
gotcha.
This one hits home for me.
Yes, and I think there's gonna be some great things on here to hopefully prevent a reoccurrence of that in the future. And so I'm going to start off with sharing some screen share. And guys, as we're going along, if you think of a question, I'm not going to stop a lot during the presentation. I'm going to try to really move through it pretty quickly, but cover everything in good detail. And then at the end, we'll definitely answer questions. I'm going to share some information, some statistics I think are kind of startling. We're going to talk about the causes of cardiovascular disease. We're going to talk about lifestyle that cause and lifestyle that treats. We're going to talk about some natural approaches to cardiovascular diseases. And I'm going to talk about a new technology that has revolutionized my practice, as well as has been a true blessing for my patients dealing with a wide range of cardiovascular disease. So as we're going along, just drop questions in the chat as you think of something, and I'll circle back around at the end and make sure I cover those. And so I'm going to screen share. I got some slides just to share with you. I like slides rather than you just looking at me and hearing me gab on all night. Let's screen share my, no, not that. There we go. All righty. Anna, can you see my screen? Awesome. And I got my Darth Vader mug here, the many expressions of Darth Vader. So, pardon me tonight, I suddenly developed a head cold. Here in Missouri, we have no idea what season it is this past week because we went from the Arctic to the summer within a few days. And so I think my immune system's saying, what the heck is going on? So here's some statistics here. Heart disease, #1 cause of death in the US, both men and women, approximately 1 million lives claimed annually. The cardiovascular disease claims more lives than all forms of cancer combined. That's starting. All forms of cancer combined, cardiovascular. Mute out, please, mute out. Cardiovascular disease kills more than that. About 700,000 people in the US suffer a heart attack each year. It's also the leading cause of death for most racial and ethnic groups in the US. In the US, every 34 seconds, someone has a heart attack. And so there's lots of different types of heart disease. This shows those: coronary artery disease and heart failure and pericarditis, cardiomyopathy, arrhythmias, aneurysms, valve disease. And we're going to focus mostly on the vascular side of things, which is the largest contributor to heart disease. So things like coronary heart disease, where we're affecting the blood vessels to the heart, right? This is where we have a heart attack. Cerebrovascular disease, where we can have a stroke. I'm going to move you guys around on my screen here. Peripheral artery disease, of course, that can affect the limbs, usually the lower extremities, but can affect the hands as well. Risk factors: alcohol abuse, blood pressure, high blood pressure, diabetes. I would say blood sugar disorders in general.
Hold on one moment. Ron, can you mute yourself? I can't seem to get you muted. Ron Gamble. Can you mute?
Did that work? Are we good? Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Now that I've shrunk you guys off my screen, I can't see as many faces, so I can't see those heads nodding. Sedentary lifestyle, high lipids, and smoking are commonly known risk factors. What I'd like to share is one thing that's not talked about very much is how much blood sugar plays a role in cardiovascular disease. We don't hear this a lot, but insulin resistance, right? We talked a lot about this in our recent blood sugar, what I call blood sugar boot camp. We did a webinar on blood sugar and diabetes. Glucose intolerance, increased blood pressure, inflammation is a huge driver for cardiovascular disease. Dyslipidemia, elevated blood lipids. Endothelial dysfunction just means that the lining of our arteries is called the endothelium. And when we have endothelial dysfunction, we're setting ourselves up for vascular diseases, vascular injuries. Type 2 diabetes leads to all of these unpleasant cardiovascular conditions. And this is really the most important thing. We've gotten things confused in the causative role of cardiovascular and vascular injuries. And this is really what we have to ask is what causes the vascular injury, right? We're going to talk a little bit about cholesterol, which I think gets vilified and demonized about causing cardiovascular disease, which I'm going to share with you is a complete myth and is untrue. So what can cause a vascular injury? Smoking, high blood pressure, high insulin, high blood sugar, high homocysteine. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, what that is. Inflammation and stress. Okay, those can cause vascular injuries to the blood vessels. Okay, and the cholesterol myth, we're going to talk a little bit about this because there's a lot of misinformation that's been going on for a very, very long time in this realm, and sadly is still being taught and spread when it's been known for a long time that the research just isn't there to support this claim. So we've heard that cholesterol is evil, right? Cholesterol, if we eat too much cholesterol or saturated fat, it's going to clog our arteries and we're going to have a heart attack, right? Has anybody heard that? Am I the only one that's heard that? So we're told that we eat too much cholesterol, it's going to clog our arteries, right? And 80% of our cholesterol is made by your liver. So only 20% actually, and probably some studies say less than that, actually comes from your diet. So guess what your liver does if you go on a low-fat diet and you eat less cholesterol? Guess what your liver does? It just makes more. Okay. Okay. So and 25% of the cholesterol in our body is in our brain. So something tells me that if there's that much cholesterol in our brain, that maybe cholesterol isn't such a bad guy, right? And so what we're not taught, and we don't hear talked about, is that cholesterol is vital in making cell membranes. The membrane around every cell in your body is made out of lipids or cholesterol. Hormones, all of our hormones, our sex hormones, our testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, are all made out of cholesterol. Bile acids in the gallbladder, enabling us to break down fats in our diet, needs cholesterol. Vitamin D, the fat soluble vitamin D, we actually have cholesterol in our skin, right? It's ultraviolet rays that hit our skin that convert that cholesterol into vitamin D. And so low levels of cholesterol have actually been linked to Alzheimer's, depression, memory loss, stroke, violent behavior, and even suicide. I had this is how brains greet each other. I had a professor that once asked us in class, what do we call a patient with low cholesterol? And we said, what? And he said, a corpse. So, I actually had a doctor once that was talking to a patient we co-treated, and his on medication actually got his cholesterol really, really dangerously low. And, and I made a comment that, hey, I think this is really too low cholesterol. We kind of need some of that around. And he asked his cardiologist that, if his cholesterol was too low, and his cardiologist told him that he would be okay if his cholesterol was zero. And sadly, that's not very uncommon thought in traditional medicine about cholesterol. As low as we can get it, hey, we're happy. But honestly, in blood work, I'm way more concerned about low cholesterol on a blood test than I am about an elevated cholesterol. And those things that we just mentioned are one of those reasons. And so this is really where this false hypothesis, this lipid hypothesis came from. Was back in 1953. This is the cover of Time magazine. Dr. Ansel Keys came up with a revolutionary study called the 7 Countries Study. And the 7 Countries Study completely changed the landscape and is where still the thought process today originated, was that cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease. So back in the late 40s and early 50s, they were trying to figure out why heart disease was so high. And so Ansel Keys came out with this study called the 7 Countries Study. And he was almost a celebrity status after he came up with the study, because he found that these 7 countries that had the most cholesterol and the most saturated fat had the highest level of heart disease. So abracadabra, we found the villain, we found the cause of heart disease, right? It's cholesterol, it's fat in a diet. What he didn't tell people in this study, or wasn't found out for decades later, was he actually studied 22 countries. And guess why he only published 7? Well, that was because the other countries didn't line up with the lipid hypothesis. He left out countries that ate a lot of saturated fat and had very little heart disease. And the same thing, he left out the countries that ate very little fat and still had high levels of heart disease. And so this is kind of where that thought process came, and was just accepted as the gospel truth. And we just kind of stopped looking at other causes of cardiovascular disease. So as Americans, and you guys have seen it, especially through the 80s, right? We started, everything had to be low fat. And we still see it today, sadly, right? We have the low-fat yogurt, we have the low-fat cheese, we have the low-fat, we got to drink the skim milk, right? And as a human species, we've, over this time frame, we've probably ate less fat than maybe we ever have. But we have to ask ourselves, did cardiovascular disease go down as a result of these dietary changes and the so-called miraculous invention called statin drugs? Has cardiovascular disease gone down? And the answer is no. In fact, it's dramatically worsened. And so, it makes sense that maybe we need to rethink this cholesterol hypothesis. And so this is Time magazine in 1961. Then in 84, right, it's cholesterol, we had the sad face with the bacon and the eggs, right? And then here in 2014, they said, okay, we just should eat our butter. So this is starting to come around that maybe fat isn't as evil as we've been taught that it is. So this high carb diet I put you on 20 years ago gave you diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. Oops. And so that's what, a lot of the doctors have been preaching for since certainly since the 1960s, 70s, and beyond, was you need to eat all of these carbs, right? All of these healthy grains. We had the food pyramid that came out, right? And at the top was cereals and breads and grains. And then we came out, we need to use this this vegetable oil, right, instead of butter or a real fat, right? We need to eat these fake fats. This, I can't believe it's not butter, or I can't believe you eat this crap. These things that were invented. Suddenly the human body is supposed to know what to do with this stuff, right? And it doesn't, and it escalated inflammation, escalated heart disease, and that's kind of where we are today. So this is just one study that came out, said that lower naturally occurring triglyceride or total cholesterol levels, are associated with poor performance on cognitive measures, which place high demands on abstract reasoning, concentration, word fluency, and executive functioning. So obviously, lowering cholesterol is not helpful for the brain. I would encourage you, if you're a nerd like me and like to read things like this, this book is awesome. I'm not sure if you can still, it's sometimes hard to find. It's not in print anymore. You can actually read it online at that address down there. And if you like information, just get with whoever invited you later. We'll get that information to you. But you can read that book online. Great book there. This is another one that I like. It's called Fat and Cholesterol Don't Cause Heart Disease or Heart Attacks, and Statins Are Not the Solution. That's a really good book too. Challenging those theories on cholesterol and saturated fat. But then came along statins, right? Statins were the savior, supposedly touted, still are touted as the savior for heart disease, right? The question we have to answer is, statins certainly have lowered cholesterol, right? But has it been proven that lowering cholesterol in our bloodstream equals longer life, equals less heart attacks, or equals less strokes, cardiovascular disease? Has that been shown? It hasn't. Can you believe that? It has never been proven that if we lower cholesterol in our bloodstream, we're going to have less cardiovascular disease, right? So we're accepting that false narrative again, that cholesterol is evil. It's going to clog our arteries, give us a heart attack. So if we lower, I'm going the wrong way there. If we lower cholesterol in our bloodstream by taking a statin drug, we're gonna have a longer life and less heart attacks, which is absolutely false. But statins bring in $29 billion a year. So they're a rather popular drug. Nearly 1 in 3 adults over 40 take a statin. Nearly half of those 75 and older take a statin drug. And these are the increased risks that statins carry. Diabetes mellitus, I've seen this many times, developing diabetes after starting a statin drug. And of course, what do you think the answer is after starting the statin drug and developing diabetes? Do we stop the statin drug? Heavens no. We take some blood sugar medication, right? It's insane. Cataract formation, erectile dysfunction, cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, muscle weakness, liver dysfunction. The list goes on and on. Increased risk of coronary artery and aortic calcification, right? Scary stuff. Anyway, I won't go into all of that. Side effects of low cholesterol, we talked about this: depression, suicidal thoughts, increased violence, aggression, increased risk of cancer and neurodegenerative conditions. We found a bunch of these clogging your arteries. They're cholesterol pills. And so this is a, I made Anna laugh on that one. This is a blood vessel, and this is kind of what it looks like on the inside when we have what they call atherosclerosis, right? We start to get a buildup of plaque. They call it plaque here in the artery. And that narrows the artery. And of course, that can lead to, a heart attack or stroke or peripheral artery disease, depending on where this artery is. So if it's in the brain, of course, we're going to have a TIA or a stroke. In the heart, we're going to have a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. In the kidneys, we can have kidney damage due to lack of blood supply there. And the person that can't walk very long at a time without having a lot of pain in their lower extremities, they have to sit down, and then they can walk a little bit longer, and then they have to sit down, and they can walk a little bit longer. They're having intermittent claudication is what they call that, due to lack of oxygen to the lower extremities. caused by vascular disease. And so this is kind of more of the science behind atherosclerosis and vascular disease is it's an inflammatory process. Okay, and this is well researched and well accepted that this is an inflammatory process. So remember when I talked earlier that we have to have an injury. There has to be an injury, right? Cholesterol being elevated does not cause plaque in an artery. Doesn't happen, never has happened, never will happen. There has to be an injury, and we talked about those reasons that can cause that, to that endothelial lining of the blood vessel. So this is the blood vessel. If we were looking down the inside of it, right, and here's where the blood, right through here, the blood flows through here, and this here is the outer lining of that artery. And so what happens is if there's an injury here, then these LDL particles can enter the injury here, right? And so when that happens, the immune system gets notified, and because that creates some oxidative stress, creates some inflammation, these monocytes actually come in here and they squeeze through that arterial lining and they gobble up these LDL particles like Pac-Man. Reminds me of Pac-Man, right? They gobble them up, except they don't stop gobbling until they get so fat that they basically explode and they release this ooey gooey lipid material underneath the lining. See if you can see this right here. They call this a fatty streak. And that continues to happen. And over time, this is where actually creates the plaquing, right? Has to start with an injury, then the lipids are involved. So I always say, blaming cholesterol for heart disease is kind of like blaming a fireman for the fire, right? The fireman didn't cause the fire. They're there because there is one, right? And that's kind of the same analogy there. So one of the things that we mentioned in that slide earlier that can cause injury to the vascular lining is homocysteine. So homocysteine is an amino acid we all have in our bloodstream, but what happens is if this increase is too high, it can actually scrape the inner lining of that blood vessel. Okay, this is the inside of a blood vessel in the heart. That high homocysteine scraped that, and then we start to have that process we just saw, because that's the injury. Then the LDL particles get in there, right? And then the immune system comes in and starts to gobble up those LDL particles, and here we start to form some plaque. Homocysteine is caused by the most common conditions caused by is a deficiency in B12 and folate, okay, or folic acid. If we have a deficiency there, that homocysteine level can increase and cause vascular damage. The other thing that can cause that, you may have heard of, is a genetic defect called MTHFR. This genetic defect impairs our body's ability to utilize those B vitamins, and as a result can increase homocysteine. So this can go on behind the scenes. We don't have any other signs. Even if our cholesterol is normal, this high homocysteine is going on. I had a professor that compared high homocysteine to ground glass shooting through your arteries. It always left an unpleasant picture in my mind, but that's kind of what that's like. And this is a test you can have. It's an easy blood test, very inexpensive blood test to check your homocysteine levels. American Heart Association likes it less than 10. I think we should have it less than 8 homocysteine levels. So this is a picture of the plaque from the inside. If we look, right, there is the plaque. They call this a stable plaque because there's a lot of still muscular lining right here, right? And then we have what they call rupture prone plaque. There's not as much of protection right there. See that? And then of course we can, as that breaks loose, we can have that break loose and form a thrombus or a clot. And that of course can get stuck somewhere where we don't want it and cause problems. This enzyme called LPPLA2 is another test we're going to talk about. You can have done, very inexpensive blood test. If this is elevated, we are having active plaquing at this very moment. And that's a scary thought. Did you know you can test for active plaquing? You can in a blood test, a simple blood test can check this LPPLA2, this enzyme that's directly involved in the plaquing process. So that's a very helpful test that we run all the time. Some important tests: high sensitivity C-reactive protein, also sometimes called cardio C-reactive protein, is another simple blood test that measures vascular inflammation. LPA, I won't get into a lot of detail here, but LPA is a a genetic risk factor. It's a very inflammatory lipid particle that damages the arteries, causes injury to the arteries. There are things we can do to lower that. LPPLA2 we mentioned is a sign of active plaquing. Insulin, A1C, glucose, we talked a little bit about blood sugar earlier. There's 1 in 3 of us have pre-diabetes, and most don't know it. And that starts with high insulin. Way before we start having high blood sugar, we have high fasting insulin. So fasting insulin, your A1C, which is your average blood sugar, those are great markers to check into. Homocysteine, like we just mentioned, can scrape the lining of the arteries. Red blood cell magnesium. Traditional testing of serum magnesium is very inefficient. If your serum magnesium is low, you're already on death's doorstep. So it's not a very good preventative test. Red blood cell magnesium, they actually test the magnesium inside the cell, is a much better way of looking at magnesium. We're going to talk about why magnesium is important, and vitamin D. I would take these tests over your traditional lipid profile or your cholesterol profile anytime, any day of the week, providing much more valuable information on being able to, one, catch or early detection, prevention, and even prevention or stopping the progression of maybe an already developed cardiovascular illness. So these are just some self-tests here. I like to do these in my office. When we start to develop peripheral artery disease in our hands, our extremities, we start to get clubbing of the nails. So if you put your pointer finger together like that, you should have a little bitty hole right, let me get my marker, right here. If you don't, that means you have clubbing of your fingernails, which is an early sign. Well, actually, it's not really early. It's a sign of cardiovascular disease affecting your extremities. A line, a crease in the earlobe is significantly associated with underlying cardiovascular disease. What happens is these capillaries in our earlobe start to deteriorate, right, because of that vascular disease. And when they do, those earlobes aren't as plump as they once were, and we start to get a crease in that earlobe. That can be an early sign. And then you can do just a typical, what they call a capillary reflex, where you squeeze your fingernail, and then you look at it for a split second, it'll be kind of white, right? Because we squeeze the blood out of there. And you let go, it should pink right back up just at the drop of it, just immediately pink back up. If it takes a little bit of a lull there, then I'd be a little bit concerned that we're having some circulation. And it's probably even more effective to do it on your toes and see how fast they pink back up again. But those are just some easy tests. Lifestyle factors to reduce cardiovascular disease. Exercise, big surprise there, right? Doing some type of cardio related exercise, at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And then preferably adding some weight training in there at least 3 times a week. Reducing sugar, simple carbs, grains, starches, right? Because that drives the insulin and the blood sugar mechanism, which damages the arteries. Avoiding vegetable oils, right? The fake fats, the trans fats, the processed foods. Stop smoking if you're a smoker. I'd recommend an annual physical with lab work and working with a doctor that will think outside of the box and test outside of the box. Or you can have a lot of these tests done at labs these days. You can walk into some labs and just say, hey, it's kind of like a fast food restaurant. You're like, okay, today I want the Big Mac and the fries, right? Today I want the C-reactive protein and the LPA. And you can order just whatever blood test you want. Reducing stress is a huge one. Self-care, grounding. If you don't know what grounding is get outside, right? Get out in the nature, take your shoes off and go barefooted. And that pulls down stress dramatically. Stress itself, high cortisol, is damaging to arteries. Hydration, at least 64 ounces of water per day, and make sure we're getting plenty of sleep. Those are big risk factors that we can reduce our risk for cardiovascular disease. And I won't go into a lot of detail because I've already taken up a good chunk of time here, but green fruits and vegetables because of the phytonutrients in there. Blue and purple fruits and vegetables because of the anthocyanins and the vitamin C. and the folate and the polyphenols and all those good things, the flavonoids. And all right, I don't know what happened to that slide. Oh, this one's fancy. CoQ10 is we're going to talk about just a few natural support options from the nutritional realm that we can use to both for prevention and for treatment of vascular disease. CoQ10, one of the most important nutrients in the human body. Let's see. Deficiencies include congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, angina, mitral valve prolapse, stroke, cardiac arrhythmias, cardiomyopathy, lack of energy, gingivitis, and generally weakening of the immune system. It plays a critical role in the production of energy in the mitochondria, right, the powerhouse of the cell. Provides protection from free radicals, protects against the toxic effects of adriamycin, beta blockers, and drugs used for psychiatric disorders. Vitamin C is depleted by many drugs. It's a water-soluble nutrient, easily absorbed from the small intestine. It's concentrated in many tissues, but highest levels in the adrenal glands. We can't manufacture vitamin C like we can most other vitamins, so we depend on vitamin C in our diet. Other mammals can produce vitamin C themselves. We can't. So we rely solely on what we can get in our diet. It's essential in the formation of collagen, serotonin, norepinephrine. These are neurotransmitters. Thyroxine is thyroid hormone, activation of folic acid, and some of the corticosteroids. Found in fresh fruits, citrus fruits, strawberries, cantaloupe, Brussels sprouts, all of these fruits and veggies. Vitamin C decreases the so-called bad cholesterol, increases the good cholesterol, strengthens the elasticity of blood vessels, decreases free radical oxidation of cholesterol. Right when that cholesterol gets into that artery, it stops that free radical breakdown of that LDL. Decreases levels of lipoprotein A. Remember, that's that blood test, that genetic risk marker that damages the arteries. Let's see here. Magnesium, very important. It's a cofactor in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. It's necessary for the transmission of nerve impulses, and that includes nerve impulses in the heart, right? That's what contracts the heart. It's nerve impulses in the muscles. Muscular activity, temperature regulation, detoxification, formation of healthy teeth and bones. It's called the relaxation mineral, right? Deficiency symptoms include muscle cramps, weakness, insomnia, loss of appetite, GI disorders, kidney disorders, osteoporosis, nervousness, restlessness, irritability, fear, anxiety, confusion, depression, fatigue, and hypertension. I find this a lot in patients that have high blood pressure, and sometimes just simply increasing magnesium levels will improve blood pressure. And let's see. Deficiency associated with increased incidence of atherosclerosis of the arteries. It inhibits platelet aggregation, the platelets clumping together in a clot like aspirin is used for. It thins the blood, not to the degree, but somewhat like Coumadin. It blocks calcium uptake in the artery, similar to or into the that causes the high blood pressure, like calcium channel blocker drugs can. Increases oxygenation of the heart muscle. Could go on and on. I'm going to skim through this. Vitamin D, another super important vitamin for cardiovascular disease. Naturally found in fatty fish, cod liver oil, eggs. Let's see here. We don't get enough vitamin D because we're not exposed to enough sunlight, right? And like I said, vitamin D is made out of cholesterol. Protects against diabetes, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, depression, several autoimmune diseases, cancers. Addition of vitamin K2 is suggested. I like to use those together for better utilization. This is just recommended blood levels. Again, this is a blood test you can easily get done. Optimal somewhere between 50 and 70. Occasionally, we'd like to even do that higher. If there's active heart disease or cancer, some recommend even higher, but not greater than 100. All right, other natural support options, I won't go into as much detail on these, but for cardiovascular disease include L-arginine, B12, folic acid. In a supplement form, you want to look for the name folate. So folic acid, the root word is foliage, right? So in food sources, we find that in our green leafy vegetables. But in a supplement form, if it says folic acid on the bottle of your vitamin or mineral supplement, it's always synthetic. And in my opinion, throw it out. If it says folate or methylfolate or methyl tetrahydrofolate or these other names, but if you use the word folate instead of folic acid, you're generally in good shape. Hawthorn is wonderful for vascular health. Nattokinase is an enzyme that can help break down plaquing. And one thing we didn't talk about is high fibrinogen, a sticky protein in the blood that can cause or increase risk of blood clots. Nattokinase can break that down. That's in a supplement that you can easily use. Omega-3s, right? That's our fish oils, and curcumin. We can go in a little more detail on curcumin and its role in heart protection. It lowers oxidative stress markers in the blood, right? Oxidative stress is those free radicals that damage tissues and promote inflammation. It turns off certain genes which cause scarring, enlargement of the heart. It lowers bad cholesterol and high blood pressure, increases circulation, prevents clotting, and prevents heart attacks, controls inflammation that can lead to heart disease, and prevents hardening of the arteries by inhibiting that fat oxidation that we showed in that one picture where the LDL went into the artery and the monocytes gobbled it up. It inhibits that, and it also lowers lipid levels. And so this is just some of the research out there. There's a lot of research. We could have just done this whole thing on research in cardiovascular disease and curcumin. We could have done a whole hour on that. But this study here shows that curcumin can exert anti-atherosclerotic effect. That's pretty good for a Missouri boy right there, right? Through inhibiting the atherogenic properties of monocytes, right? Those are those white blood cells we saw in that picture that get into the artery lining and gobble up the LDL particles. Inhibiting the atherogenic properties of those monocytes, including inflammatory cytokines, those are those inflammatory chemicals that are involved with heart disease. Adhesion is how those monocytes attach inside the blood vessel, and the migration is how they transfer through the lining of the blood vessel and in there and create those fatty streaks and those plaquing. This was showing that curcumin inhibited this process. Curcumin in metabolic health and disease. It's been reported to have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, hepatoprotective, that's liver protective, anti-atherosclerotic, right, that plaquing, anti-diabetic properties, among others. And guys, we're bringing this home. I'm going to land this real soon now. Hang in there. Curcumin supplementation improves vascular endothelial function, the endothelial lining of the arteries in healthy middle-aged and older adults by increasing nitric oxide and reducing oxidative stress. These are just a handful of studies. Curcumin, the golden spice in treating cardiovascular disease. That's why we call it our liquid gold, right? The cardiovascular protective properties of curcumin in cardiovascular diseases have been fully illustrated in numerous studies. But one of the things that hinders this process in curcumin especially, and any of these lipid-like particles like curcumin and turmeric, is that we're trying to get a lipid-like substance into the bloodstream, right? Which is mostly water. And as you guys know, lipid and water don't mix, right? Oil and water don't mix well. So this has been a hindrance. We've known for a very long time all of the cool things that curcumin could do in a lab, in a test tube, in cell cultures, in the petri dish, right? And all of these things, these cool things in these science experiments. But then they had trouble repeating these same benefits whenever they stuck curcumin in somebody's mouth, right? And they made them take oral curcumin or oral turmeric. They weren't seeing the same benefits, right? And so they did lots of studies increasing more, trying to increase that the amount that's getting into the body. And the problem was even when they were able to get it into the bloodstream, as this trial here shows, major reasons contributing to the low plasma and tissue levels of curcumin appear to be due to poor absorption, rapid metabolism, and rapid systemic elimination. So if they could get it even into the bloodstream, it was rapidly broken down and then rapidly excreted, right? It was out the door in the urine in just a matter of usually a couple hours. And so they weren't seeing the therapeutic benefits of curcumin like they thought they would. And so this has been a challenge over the years. They've done many things to curcumin that has trying to improve bioavailability. They've added black pepper extract to curcumin, and that did help in some to some degree. They've come out with liposomal formulas, and all of this new technology is trying to find ways to get this curcumin into the bloodstream and then into the cells where it could have all of these amazing properties. This curcumin is known and it's the most studied herb in history, and it's known as the most powerful herb that's ever been studied. And so what I'm excited about, and I mentioned earlier, is a new technology, right? That's overcoming this, and one that I'm seeing amazing benefits just in my practice, and that is called BioMS. So BioMS is a German technology that they were able to shrink these curcumin particles down to the size of 30 nanometers. Now, 30 nanometers doesn't mean much to me, but if you take the thickness of your fingernail and you were to slice it 1,000,000 times, and you were to take out one of those millionth slices of your fingernail, that is the size of a nanometer, okay? So these curcumin particles were shrunk down to the size of a nanometer, and of less than 30 nanometers, excuse me, and then they're wrapped in a micelle structure. Now, this micelle structure is able to carry the curcumin particles easily in water, okay, or in lipid or fat or oil. And so easily getting this into the bloodstream, easily getting this into the cells, into the brain, into the tissues, and the research shows at a rate of 277 times more bioavailable than traditional curcumin or turmeric supplementation. So that's what originally got my attention, to look a little bit deeper at this technology. And as I've used it in practice, I've been blown away at the applications, at the patient's response to this, even though I've used curcumin and turmeric in practice for over 20 years. This has been just mind-blowing in the effects that it has shown. And this is what it looks like here. It's a little liquid dropper bottle. Most people will use 10 drops of this a day. And you can see the 277 times more bioavailable there in the studies. And so as I wrap this up, I hope that this information was valuable. I hope you learned something about cardiovascular disease that you didn't know. I hope you took away something that can impact your health or the health of someone you love. If you're on here or you see this and you have a loved one that needs to see this that wasn't on, make sure to reach out to whoever invited you, and we'll get you a copy of the replay. But the main thing I wanted to say, Anna, before I turn it back over to you, is if you're interested in applying this technology, I would encourage to get back with the person who invited you to share some more information on this research, on this new technology, and so that you can get it either in your hands if it's something that your body needs potentially, or into maybe a family member that's maybe dealing with a condition that this could be beneficial for. It's blown me away, and I think that you'll be very pleased with the benefits. So anyway, wrapping it up and turning back over to you, Anna.
Thank you again, Dr. Jeremy. That was so good. Hopefully you all, just like me, learned more tonight, just like I do every Thursday night at 9:30 my time. Thank you again so much for taking your time and sharing with us on heart health. And from all the little chatter around, I think next week we're going to be talking about leaky gut. Are we on the same page, doctor? Okay. So start thinking about, who do you know that struggles with gut issues? And honestly, that's like the whole world. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Hopefully we will see you all back here next week. And if you'll give me to maybe around noon tomorrow, I'll try to go faster, but in case I don't, I'll have this out there for you all to share with all your friends. And have a wonderful night, sweet dreams, and we'll talk again soon.
Bye, guys. Love y'all.